fellow Falcoholics, what is up? Welcome to a somber edition of the Falcoholic Live. I'm your host, Kevin Knight, here to bring you an emergency show with a terrific cast of guests to discuss one of the most impactful moves of the offseason, which is the departure of Julio Jones, the star wide receiver who spent until now all of his career with the Atlanta Falcons. My personal favorite Falcon of all time has been traded officially to the Tennessee Titans in exchange for a 2022 second-round pick and a 2023 fourth-round pick. The Falcons also sent a 2023 sixth-rounder as a part of the deal. So, we're going to break it down. We're going to talk about it in detail. We did have another show on this. The Falcoholic podcast put out a show yesterday, also with one of our guests, Gina Kelly, and also Evan Birchfield, along with DW. So if you need more analysis on the trade, the instant reactions, you can check that out after the show. Oh, wait, Adnan was there. Wow, I was like, I feel like I'm forgetting someone from the show, but, yeah. Well, Adnan hasn't been on here in so long, and then, of course, the first show he comes back, he goes to the Falcoholic podcast instead, so I'm very insulted. This is just me being passive-aggressive, so... But speaking of Adnan Ikic, he is here with us at Say Which Way. Adnan, how are you doing today?
Yeah, what you guys don't know is it's actually a civil war going on in the Falcons right now. It's a real nasty.
The pod and the live show, the true rivalry. It's even more intense than Falcons Saints. So.
It's the trade's done. I think we saw it coming for a while. I was saying on the podcast yesterday, it feels like it would have been much worse if we were just blindsided by it and just like, oh, yesterday, no news today. Oh, they're trading Julio Jones. Then it would be like, all right, what the hell? Yeah. But, now it's like there was so much talk ad nauseum. It was almost to the point of, all right, let's just get it over with.
Right. We had discussed it to death. We'd had a million articles on it. I was going to write an article this week if the trade hadn't happened yet, but luckily it did. And we can actually talk about something that happened, as sad as it is. Also joining us, we have our Director of Guest Personnel, Evan Birchfield, at the very easy to remember, at Evan Birchfield on Twitter. Evan, how are you doing today?
I am well. I had to pay homage to Julio one last time. I don't break my jerseys out unless it's something special. And it's going to be weird, I think. The news is settled in for me, but seeing, the Falcons playing and not seeing 11 out there is going to be a little weird. Yeah. But, it is what it is. It's a business, and I hope the best for him in Tennessee. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I was saying I also have, a Julio Jones jersey in that red, but mine is signed by Matt Bryant. Okay, so is yours signed by Matt Bryant, Evan?
No, but I have a Matt Bryant jersey signed by Matt Bryant. So.
Well, all right. I guess that's acceptable. Yeah. Matt Bryant was like the nicest guy at that training camp, by the way. He stayed for at least 10 minutes to sign everyone's jerseys that wanted to have them signed. So big shout out to Matt Bryant as well.
That was like that Simpsons episode of, oh, I sleep in a race car bed, do you? No, I sleep in a big bed with my wife.
Adnan always has a Simpson reference.
He does. He's got them just... I'm very impressed. Yeah, we've missed you, Evan. We also have joining us Gina Kelly. She is at Gina Thomas on Twitter. Gina, how are you doing today?
Well, it's not every day that you see your franchise trade away a future Hall of Famer and a generational talent at wide receiver, so I'm still kind of wrapping my head around it. It's been a very interesting couple of days here.
Yes, it has been a stressful one. We thought, including, a friend of the show, Tori McElhaney, thought, I just need to go ahead and take a break, because the Julio news is going to come soon, so we got to get out of here. And then, of course, it comes on a Sunday, which I think is just rude to everyone who works in sports media. Our Sundays, not during the football season, are supposed to be sacred. So, come on, guys, why are you doing this to us? But, no consideration for our feelings in this trade. That's abundantly clear. So, we also have joining us Eric Robinson at _Eric_Robinson. Eric, how are you doing?
I'm here.
I'm doing okay. I've seen better days, and it kind of hit home a little bit this morning watching Julio get off that damn jet in Nashville.
I tried not to see that. Yeah, I failed.
I didn't
but
want to see that. Yeah.
It's pretty tough. It's tough. And we'll also have, assuming he can wrestle away from work for a few minutes, Dave Choate, the Falcoholic himself, is going to try to make an appearance at some point during the show as well. So there's a lot we could talk about. There's a lot we're going to have to get to, including, what we think about the compensation. That's probably where we'll start things off. But also, how does this impact the Falcons roster? Because losing a player of Julio's significance is a big deal in terms of roster construction and, the ceiling for this offense, and also the salary cap implications, because those are very important and are one of the keys of the deal. So we will definitely get to that. We also have a donation coming in from Demonte24 of $2. Demonte, thank you so much for your support, man. We appreciate you. He says, tired of fans trashing Julio. They're doing it because their feelings are hurt. Obviously, we didn't want it to end this way, but that's life. Grateful for those 10 years, knowing he'll always be known and remembered as a Falcon. Yeah, totally agree with you there, man. It's always tough to see a separation, particularly when it's as charged as this one is with negative emotion. And we'll talk about that a little bit, but for the most part, I think we all just need to kind of move on, have a clean break, and not, get too tripped up in a blame game situation, because that doesn't really solve anything except maybe making us feel a little bit better, but it's temporary. It doesn't really fix anything. So, we won't linger on that too long, but, the first thing, obviously, we're going to talk about is compensation, because that's the big headline. Falcons net a 2022 second and a 2023 fourth. And I had remarked in the past that this was basically the bare minimum I would have taken. I don't know why we couldn't have had the 2023 fourth be a 2022 fourth, but if that's what it took to get the fourth, I guess that's okay. And no, I don't care about giving up a 2023 sixth. I bet you in 2023 the Falcons will have at least one sixth-round comp pick based on how the roster is constructed. So it does not matter at all. That's basically worthless in terms of trade compensation. So, let's get some takes on that. I know several of you have had a chance to show your thoughts on the podcast, so I'll go to Eric first, who I haven't heard from yet. Eric, what is your takeaway on the compensation the Falcons received? Do you think it's fair? What are your thoughts on that?
I'll be honest, it's to me it's not, but it's not a knock on the Falcons front office. It's more of me aiming at the teams and looking at an all-pro, a future Hall of Famer like Julio Jones, and just, because it was obvious that was the best offer on the table. And if that's the best offer on the table, I don't even want to know what else was offered, because I'm sure it was disgraceful to an extent, what other teams thought of Julio and what they offered as far as that goes. Now, I get teams were weary about paying the $15 million, so that had a reflection a little bit on what was on the table. But, Julio Jones, the talent like that, it doesn't grow on trees. You don't get guys like that. And he is at a point in his career. Yes, he's 32. He has 10 years under his belt, but he's still elite. When he's healthy and he's out there performing, he is the best receiver in the league. Plain and simple. No debate here. So for teams to view that and see him and throw out less than what the Falcons actually took, to me, it's a slap in the face. But the Falcons took what they got. The second and a fourth next year, I'm with you, Kevin. I wish it would have been a fourth for 2022 instead of 2023. Mm-hmm. But that probably had a tie into the Titans. I'm pretty sure if they offered a 2022 fourth, they probably would have wanted some salary relief as well on top of that. And the Falcons were not willing to budge. I will commend Terry Fontenot again for not budging on that. You can afford paying that salary, so do not move from that. You can be flexible with the draft picks and with the compensation in that aspect, but this team cannot afford to pay any of his salary unless he was on the roster and he was playing. But if they're going to trade him, they don't want to pay it, and I don't blame them. I wouldn't want to pay it. Why would you want to pay somebody to not play for your team? Like I never understood that. But it's fair, I guess. So we'll see what they do going forward. But like I said, if that's the best offer that was on the table, man, I I can just imagine what other teams thought of or what they offered the Falcons.
Yeah. I mean, like with regards to the salary, I want to make it clear to people that teams were always going to be forced to pay Julio Jones full salary as a part of the trade. The Falcons were not going to consider any offers where they were going to have to pay salary. That would be unusual for a trade like this, for the trading team to pay any of the salary. Because I mean that's just, it's not something that teams often do unless, they have a lot of cap space. They might be willing to do it. But, I think a tweet from ESPN got people all tripped up that like teams were, trying to get out of paying his salary cap. And sure, I'm sure they would like to have that option, but it was never a serious consideration. The Falcons were never going to agree to that. And like I said, it would be unusual for a team to agree to that. So, I wouldn't necessarily hold up the fact that the Falcons got the Titans to take the whole salary as like some sort of big win. I mean, it's nice that obviously that it happened, but I think that that was kind of the bare minimum of the deal. It was like, you're paying his salary no matter what. So, the big problem I think is like, this is the bare minimum of what I would accepted. So I don't think it's bad value. I just don't think it's good either, which is maybe the best sign that it's a fair trade probably for both sides. And, it was unlikely we were going to be able to wait this out and get premium value with the situation as it was. Julio making it clear that he wanted to leave, and the fact that the Falcons seemingly backed themselves into the corner of, we are depending on this trade to sign our draft class before the draft, or before training camp. So Falcons didn't have much leverage. Teams knew they couldn't play hardball and wait it out. So in this situation, the Falcons were limited. They probably had to take a more fair offer than they may have needed to if they weren't requiring the salary cap space to sign the draft class. So, that needs to be taken into account. Me personally, I probably would have rathered that they had extended Grady or something like that. And then you could afford to wait, take the trade into training camp, and possibly get better compensation after there's some sort of injury in training camp, because it's going to happen. I mean, it always happens. You can take advantage of that, where you then have the leverage of teams like, oh, now we have to make this trade instead of the Falcons being the ones that have to make it. That's the way it fell. And, I think Gina and everybody else mentioned it in the podcast, which was that the Falcons probably don't want this hanging over them going into training camp, and I don't blame them. But if they wanted the maximum value, if they really wanted to be sticklers for that first round pick, that's what they would have had to have done, and it seems like they weren't willing to do that. So
yeah, real quick from a PR standpoint, they, I mentioned this when the whole episode came out, with Undisputed, with what he did on that show. They didn't want to go into training camp with this hanging over their head, because they're going to be, from day one, minute one of training camp, it's all going to be about Julio. They're not going. Media is not going to care about Kyle Pitts. They don't want to care about how Matt Ryan looks out on the field. It's going to be Julio 24/7 in training camp. And for a young GM and a young head coach, that is stress. They don't need that going into year one.
Yeah. Gina, what's your takeaway on the level of compensation the Falcons got? You think it was fair, all things considered?
Yeah, I mean, obviously on its face, I think that it's underwhelming for a player of Julio's caliber. He's going to be a Hall of Famer. He's like a perpetual Pro Bowler. He's a generational kind of player. And so, yeah, from that perspective, it's underwhelming. But if you're looking at the reality of the situation, the Falcons were in a really difficult position, specifically with the salary cap, which is not the fault of Terry Fontenot or Arthur Smith. They're still cleaning up messes and are going to be for some time left behind by the previous administration. And so, just knowing that they didn't even have enough money to sign their draft picks it puts them at a real disadvantage. And then what further complicated it was Julio going on the Undisputed, whether he knew that he was live or not, saying that he wanted out really put the Falcons between a rock and a hard place, because if your star player wants out, he doesn't want to play for you, like, you've got to move him. Mm-hmm. And so I think that just created a different level of urgency for the team to go ahead and move on there.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And that does kind of tie into Practical Broker's comment with the $5 donation as well. Practical, thank you so much. We appreciate your support. He says, people talk like there was some sort of choice, and there really wasn't, because Julio, wanted to leave. Previous poor decisions finally caught up to the franchise. With this, we can finally move forward and upward. Let the new era begin with some adults in charge of personnel for a change.
Yeah.
So, I'm definitely hoping for that, Practical, for sure, man. Also, we do have joining us Dave Choate, the Falcoholic himself. Dave, I know your time is somewhat limited, so I wanted to give you a chance to weigh in on we're talking about the compensation now. So what do you think about the compensation the Falcons were able to get for Julio?
Well, nobody gave me any money or draft picks for being personally hurt by this trade, so that's unfortunate.
That's a big negative,
honestly. It's a big negative for me personally. The compensation, I think, I can't ignore the drumbeat of, there's no way they're getting a first round pick. I think, to your point, Kevin, if they had dragged this out long enough, you might have gotten the kind of injury or, oh crap moment from a GM who was like, I have to have Julio. But I think even then, it wouldn't have been what has been called in recent weeks a clean first rounder, right? They would have wanted something else back in addition to Julio. And I suspect that the first rounder that was out there reportedly, and I think Albert Breer wrote today about this, was not clean. They were expecting to get another draft pick back along with Julio. And so, it doesn't seem like enough. It was never going to feel like enough for Julio Jones because he's Julio Jones. I think if you look at the fact that, there were so many reports suggesting they weren't going to get it, it's probably a fair price. It's hard for me as somebody who was really excited about putting all these weapons on the field together, and seeing what Matt Ryan and Arthur Smith could do with Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley, Kyle Pitts, etc., to accept that, second rounder and then a fourth rounder next year, and he's gone. So it doesn't feel like enough, even if they really nail those two picks, which I hope they do. It will never quite feel like enough, but they were kind of backed up against the wall. They had clearly decided that this was going to they were going to free their cap space by doing this. Julio wanted out. So, knowing as best we can from the reports that were out there what else was being offered, it's probably the right move, but it's a move that makes me sad. So I don't like it.
Yeah, big sad for sure. Adnan, your thoughts on the compensation?
I think it was fine, actually, just because you are worth what the market dictates. And I understand we are fans of the Falcons. We're fans of Julio Jones. So we're going to look at it with our heart and our emotions all the time. And, you look at what Julio Jones has done for the franchise in the past 10 years. And like Dave said, no amount of compensation would have ever felt like it would have been enough. But then just to look at it from the other side of things, from, let's say, Tennessee's point of view, who made the trade, Julio Jones is 32 years old. He's certainly toward the back end of his prime, on the wrong side of 30. He has a contract. They had to take his entire contract, and I commend Terry Fontenot, like Eric said, for sticking to his guns, for drawing that line in the sand, and for saying, if you don't take his entire contract, then it's a no-go. Like, we'll hold on to him for as long as possible. So they're taking his entire contract, which, in my opinion, I feel like the Falcons, and I wrote an article about this years ago, back in 2018, I feel like it was a mistake to even give him that 3-year, $66 million contract when he had 3 years left on his deal in the first place.
Yeah, like the New Year's have like just now started too. Like, that's what's funny about it, is like
yeah, that was a terrible precedent to set. And I feel like Thomas Dimitroff, through his pandering to the fan base, he constantly made moves that were questionable on the field, on the books, but that made him, look better toward the fan base, which is always a terrible quality to have for a GM. And that explains a few of those like ridiculous, like, draft night videos of him explaining the draft picks to the fan base after every single pick. But that's a story for that's a complete
that's for the Dead Zone episode that's coming soon. Yeah.
But yeah, it's Julio Jones does have 3 years left, and I remember Albert Breer in that article. I recommend everyone to read it on Monday Morning Quarterback this morning. It was a fantastic article, had a lot of insights. Something else that people, maybe aren't considering, if Julio Jones has a great season this year, which, definitely possible, he may demand another contract going into next season. And, he may be willing to hold out as well. So that plays into it as well. There's a lot of levels. There's a lot of layers to this, which, it sucks. I wanted as much compensation as possible, but given the fact that he demanded a trade months ago, given the fact that he's 32 years old, that's on the table, the fact that this contract, in my opinion, is pretty rich for him, or pretty rich overall, the $22 million a year annual contract. I feel like a second round pick and a fourth rounder next year it's fine, given the fact that they took the entire contract.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And then finally, we'll wrap it up with Evan here on the compensation. Evan, anything else you wanted to add?
No, I think everybody covered it brilliantly. The only other thing is, I see online some people make the comparison that they could have got more, that Mohamed Sanu went for a second round pick. And I think DW said it best on the podcast yesterday, that the Falcons robbed the Patriots. Like, that was a robbery. This was more of a fair trade and what you'd expect, considering his age is on onset and stuff. So
yeah, that's true. Definitely something to keep in mind. So yeah, I guess now we could talk about the salary cap implications, because those are very important as well. So the trade does clear a lot of salary this year for the Falcons. It clears $15.3 million, which was the entire base salary from Julio Jones. It does not clear his $7.75 million prorated signing bonus, and the way they did it with the posthumous first cut, it delays the rest of the prorated bonus until next year. But that ends up being a bad thing for next year, because they have to pay 2 years worth of bonus both next season. So the Falcons only end up actually saving about $3.75 million in 2022 net, because they're paying $15 million in prorated bonus next year. But he is completely off the books by 2023, so they do see some cap relief later. But obviously that's a big deal for this year, getting that money off the books. The Falcons are expected to need around 7.1 or so million to sign the draft class, which means that they have about 8 million left after Julio Jones's trade. So they do have some money to play around with. But with Julio now gone, and the salary cap relief, they're probably going to use the money to bring in some players this year. They could also potentially save some of it for next year to roll over to help with next year's cap problems, which are also significant, just so people know. But let's talk about what they might do with the salary cap this year, other than signing the rookies. So Dave, I'll go to you first. Do you expect them to bring in some extra free agents, or do you think they're going to end up saving most of this for next year?
I think they'll sock some money away, so I'm not expecting them to go out and get a bunch of guys that we want, even if that would be, a good way to make you feel better. Kind of like when your parents lose your puppy or something, they buy you some toys, I guess. I don't know. I'm not on my metaphor game today, but yes, I do expect them to be somewhat active and go out there and pick up some veterans. I think you look at this team as constructed, and we can all pick out the holes, right? Even if you're fairly comfortable with some of the stopgap guys they've put together here, I still have some serious questions, even with DNPs being blitz happy. Where is the pass rush going to come from? Who besides Fowler is being counted upon to be like a major player for the Falcons? So I think they'll at least sniff around. I know Justin Houston's a name that's come up a lot. It would be nice if a little bit late to get him in Atlanta at this stage of his career. Would have been better if he was drafted, but that's a separate topic for another day. And I do think that this team's running back depth, their cornerback depth, And certainly even along the offensive line where you have some question marks, I think, about the veteran depth at least. They could go out and add some players for relatively cheap still. I don't think they're going to make any huge splashes to shore things up. The one thing that I'm not sure of is, are they going to go get a wide receiver?
Right.
Given that Julio is no longer here, there's no slam dunk option, I think, to elevate to his starting role, although I kind of expect it to go to Russell Gage at this point. But regardless of that, I think given the options that they've assembled, they just signed Sharp, it seems like a month or two ago, but it was probably a week or two. So
it was like a little over a week. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just like time has no meaning anymore.
Yeah,
my gosh. But yeah, I think, they'll look at the talent they've assembled, and then they may also dip into that. But I definitely think, even setting aside, even if it's just a couple million, they'll be active. I don't think they're quite done with the roster yet.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're probably going to sign somebody, maybe 2 players, maybe 3. I mean, they're not going to go spend every penny that they have. So if you guys are like, oh, well, technically, they could go sign Ingram and Geno Atkins, and they could go sign Brian Poole, and they could sign a guard and all this. They're probably going to add a couple players, but, expect them to probably keep at least 3 to 4 million in reserve, and they'll probably be hoping to just kind of carry that over to next year if they can. Every little bit helps, and they do.
Kevin, yeah. They actually want to sign all of those guys, but Dave told them not to.
Oh, okay. So it's all Dave's fault when it doesn't happen. Good to know.
At the Falcoholic with your complaint.
Your heel turn has been fascinating to watch.
So wait a minute. So Dave couldn't tell him to not trade Julio?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Julio actually wanted to stay, but Dave told him that he sucks. So that.
I hope you spill all your Twizzlers on the ground from now until the end of time. That's my most serious curse for you.
Oh man, big sad. But yeah, Adnan, do you have any players that you'd want them to sign? What do you think they're going to do with this money?
Given what we've seen, I think that Terry Fontenot has made it the number one priority to fix the cap room, and that's going off of what you said earlier, that they could have restructured Grady Jarrett if they wanted to, and held on to Julio Jones until training camp. But they chose not to, because giving Grady Jarrett an extension next offseason will maximize the relief on the cap space that, Thomas Dimitroff made a mess of in the past few years. So I think that they may look to sign a cheap free agent, maybe even 2, but they're definitely not going to go on some spending spree after signing the draft class. I think that the majority of it they'll want to carry over into next offseason, because Julio Jones has a dead cap hit that you're going to have to eat next offseason as well.
Yeah, it's, they probably, if anything, it's going to be a lot of 1-year deals, because they don't necessarily have much to carry over next year. I mean, they'll have a little bit more flexibility. They do have some potential moves they can do, like if they were to extend Matt Ryan, which they will extend Matt Ryan. I'm very sure about that, unless they're not keeping Matt Ryan. So that seems unlikely at this point. So with a Matt Ryan extension and a Grady Jarrett extension, they can save like over $30 million right there. So that obviously helps. That's not a ton to play around with, but it's a lot more than they had this year. So, they'll be okay next year, but they still don't have room to make any of these big maneuvers for premium players. But there are certainly some relatively low price guys that they could consider. Gina Kelly, do you have any players that you're eyeing for them to sign here? Any spots you'd like to see them address?
Well, so Spotrac is projecting the Falcons have like just over 16 million in available space right now. And they're also projecting that it will cost over 13 million to sign their draft class. So, I mean, I'm sure that they would love to sign some free agents, but with what? Because that is not very much money left over.
Spotrac,
I mean, if you're talking...
Spotrac doesn't, for the record, Spotrac does not factor in the top 51 rule for the draft class amount. Which is why
they actually do. They have both for the top 51. Yeah, the top 51. That dollar amount is sorry, that's dead money. 10.4 million. So still not a ton. And if they're looking to carry over some money to the cap for next year. I just don't know what they're going to sign free agents with. So I would not get your hopes up about any like splashy signings because the Falcons are broke. There's almost $22 million in dead cap, getting back to, slandering Thomas Dimitroff about how poorly he handled it. And so that's a big part of the problem, and chipping away at that and getting that off the books has got to be a big priority for Fontenot, because that's just wasted money. They're still paying Desmond Trufant. I mean, when did he move on? It's been years, right? I know time is fake now, but like it seems like a long time ago.
Yeah, no, I don't his deal is weird. They're still paying, I think, like prorated signing bonus or something stupid from that one. So
yeah, they must be. So anyway, that's kind of how I see it. I mean, obviously they have needs. There are some free agents out there who wouldn't be too expensive and could actually help this team, but I don't know that they really have the cap flexibility to sign anybody but their draft class right now.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's limited, obviously. Like, best case scenario, they can maybe get a handful of guys in here. But yeah, it's going to be tight. So, someone very specific like a Melvin Ingram, a Brian Poole, a Try Turner, someone who's not going to, none of those guys are likely to be prohibitively expensive just because, like, they're still on the market, so they can't be that expensive at this point. But I don't think they're going to be willing to sign for like veteran minimum either. So how
maybe
they
if we ask really nicely,
yes, we can send them fruit baskets.
I love it.
Yeah, so I mean, we'll see. I'm very interested to see this. Like, it's like a Spotrac / OTC fight, because one of them they have very different numbers for the class. So I'm interested to see where it ends up actually falling.
That is,
because I see what you're saying, because they are apparently factoring it in. But so yeah, I'm very interested to see where it signs up, because the difference between that 10 million number you said and the like the 7 million that OTC says, that's a big difference. Like, that's like a free agent.
Yeah, no, well, yeah, exactly. And so if OTC is right, then yeah, I definitely think that they'll add a few, lower priced veterans through free agency. And there are a bunch of guys available who aren't going to be very expensive. But yeah, if Spotrac is right, then they're working with like peanuts there. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, I will be eagerly awaiting to see how that actually shakes out. And in the meantime, anybody else have any free agents they are going to cape for before we move on here?
Yeah, I mean, I do expect them to get at least one free agent, maybe two, if we're feeling lucky. But I think this is the element that Terry Fontenot shines in when it comes to finding those bargain free agents and making them work within the system. Like, that's pretty much how he developed his reputation in New Orleans. So I think this is an opportunity for him to kind of, flex his muscles a little bit and get that free agent that's out there now that they have a little cash. And, we may look back on it, 5-6 months from now and saying, man, he signed that free agent after trading Julio for pennies, and now this free agent is leading the team in this, or he's doing this. So I do expect them to get at least one, but I also expect them to go into the season with roughly $5 or $6 million in like emergency funds, which is smart, which is one thing that I've always liked about the previous regime. They always did that. Dimitroff did that every year. He went into the season with, in case of emergency money, and it was smart. I mean, you wouldn't go on a trip with no money in your pocket, would you? You wouldn't. That's kind of foolish. So it's the same thing like going into a 17-game season, and you wouldn't want to do that with no money because anything could happen. So yeah, like I said, I do expect them to get one free agent. I'm with Dave. I hope that free agent is probably more on the defensive side of the ball to help out that pass rush, because I'm a little worried about that myself. So yeah, we'll see where they go in that direction.
I wanted to add to that real quick too. When you said, Terry Fontenot, Eric, and his track record here and what might actually happen. Ross Jackson with Canal Street Chronicles, which is our sister site for the Saints, wrote a good article this morning talking about how the Julio Jones trade might not be a benefit to the Saints. Obviously, the benefit is Julio Jones isn't in the division anymore. But one thing he noted was, this is what Terry Fontenot is good at. He proved it in New Orleans, is picking up those budget free agents who turn out to be somebody. And he said, with that opportunity, with that cash, you wouldn't expect him to squander it. And that's coming from somebody who knows, Terry Fontenot's track record well. So my hope is that carries over to Atlanta, and we do get a guy or two who ends up being, not an impact player, but certainly a useful one.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I mean, I think it's very interesting. And again, it depends on exactly how much the draft class is going to cost and what these guys are willing to sign for. But like, you would think players like Melvin Ingram, like Justin Houston, have offers on the table, and maybe they're just weighing where they would like to play. Obviously, like Justin Houston, Melvin Ingram, they could potentially walk right into a starting role. So that might be, a game changer for them if they're trying to perhaps parlay, themselves into a decent contract next year with a 1-year deal in Atlanta. I still can't believe like Brian Poole isn't signed. I mean, he was one of the best nickel corners, if not the best nickel corner in the league in 2020. So I just don't understand why he's not signed. Like, he's a great blitzer. Like, no offense to Isaiah Oliver, who was like a fine slot corner last year, but if Poole is available for like $2 million or less, I would just bring in Poole, let Oliver be depth instead, and have a much more comfortable top 3 in the secondary. So I just don't get why he's not being signed. I mean, I think he would be perfect for what Dean Pease likes to do with the blitzing. So it's just weird to me that he's still out there. But most important, I think, would be adding like a pass rusher. So, Melvin Ingram, Justin Houston, if they're willing to come here for a few $1 million, come right on down, guys. I will welcome you with open arms. I don't even care that Justin Houston's 32. Like, the reunion has been a long time coming. So he needs to, go ahead and get up in here. That would be great. But yeah, man, there's a lot of emotions riding on this Julio trade too, and I don't want to get too much into that because I think it's very tough to talk about. We can read a couple donations real quick too. We got another $2 from Demonte24. He says, "Love you guys. Love all the work you do. Do we need a wide receiver too? And do we need someone that's more of a deep threat? Anyone out there we could acquire? Gage seems like he's more suited to the slot. Also, I think Kyle Pitts is going to go for 800 yards and 8 touchdowns because we need it." There's not really any great wide receivers available. I mean, like, Larry Fitz is technically still out there, I think, but I think he's basically considering retiring at this point. And I just, with, like, Tajay Sharp is probably, like, an example of what you're going to be able to find in the free agent market right now. And Sharp was, like, a fine wide receiver 4/3 maybe for Arthur Smith in 2019. Where he had like 330 yards and 4 touchdowns on 25 catches, that's fine production. But yeah, I mean, I don't think they're going to be able to go out and add an impact receiver in free agency. They're going to be depending a lot on guys like Russell Gage, obviously, to step up, Olamide Zaccheaus, Frank Darby, and, Tajay Sharp, who they just signed, who's probably walking into a roster spot at worst at this point. But what do you guys think about the wide receiver depth at this point without Julio? Do they need to make more additions there, or are we as good as we're going to get at this point? Anyone?
I mean, they could add, they could obviously add more talent at that position. But I think where the Falcons are really fortunate is that obviously Calvin Ridley is a very good player. He would have been the top wideout on any team that didn't have Julio Jones. So I think he's very prepared to step into that role. Kyle Pitts is amazing. I'm super excited to see what he can do at the next level. And while Julio is really irreplaceable, I think that Kyle Pitts might be the type of player who can come closer than most other players as far as, replacing that productivity and just that threat on the field. Beyond that, like, Gage really flashed some last year. I think that he showed some promise. I think that they're probably okay. I'm more concerned at this point about making sure that they have a successful or like even remotely effective ground game, because I think that that's going to make the passing game so much easier in general. And also, we've seen what Arthur Smith offenses can do when they do have that effective ground game. So I think at this point, I'm much more worried about the running back situation than I am about the receiver group.
Yeah, Arthur Smith seems to be taking a very Kyle Shanahan-esque approach to running back, where he's like, I don't care. Whoever it is going to get 1,000 yards because my scheme is what matters, and they're going to try that. Mike Davis, obviously someone who's capable of being a starter, but outside of one really good season in San Francisco, he's been pretty average in terms of his stats. They do have Cordarrelle Patterson, who I guess is kind of a wild card, but he's probably more of a few carries a game kind of gadget player than he is a guy you're giving 10 plus carries to. I know Thor Nystrom, and there's definitely a hive forming for Javian Hawkins to be a guy who actually does have a role on this team as the more dynamic presence. So we'll have to see, what kind of role he can grow into. But yeah, I mean, it's going to depend a lot on scheme and also the offensive line stepping up, because the run blocking was not adequate last year, and we can definitely blame Dirk Cutter for some of it, but either way, the run blocking was simply not good enough. So you can only do so much with scheme.
I felt like this trade was really going to, set the offense back a little bit, and I still feel that way. Like there's no replacing Julio Jones. You're not going to go out and get a free agent, and you're not going to draft a certain guy and hope he develops and says, okay, we have filled that void. There's no doing that, especially at this point in time for the Falcons. So that wide receiver core as a whole, Calvin, everybody's going to have to step up. Calvin really is going to have to now be the lead horse. And I know he had his trial by fire last year, and he performed very well without Julio, but now all the chips are really on the table. Now you're really the wide receiver one. Now defenses are really going to be preparing to taking you out of the equation on game day. So it's it's going to be interesting to see how they manage this going forward. I don't think, honestly, they go and get another guy in free agency. I think they're just going to roll with what they have. They're fairly deep at receiver right now. It's just more of question marks than anything else.
Yeah.
But I would tell you this, and I don't think it's going to happen. But if Kyle Pitts doesn't have a great rookie year, it's not going to look good. Like they're really depending on that at this point. And rightfully so. I mean, he's drafted 4th overall. You expect he's coming into the season with high expectations. But man, if Kyle Pitts is not Kyle Pitts in year one, which is a lot to ask for a rookie, man, this offense is going to get bogged down a little bit.
Yeah, it's going to be tough if Kyle Pitts isn't as expected, because they're really depending on him to be the guy right away. And if any tight end can come into the league and do it, Pitts probably has as good a chance as anyone. But they're putting a lot of pressure on him to step up.
And Arthur Smith has dealt with 2 athletic tight ends before, because if you recall, a couple years ago when they drafted Jonnu Smith, they still had the luxury of having Delaney Walker on the roster, who was still a respectable, formidable tight end in the league at that point in time. So he's used to having 2 athletic tight ends, or I'm not saying he's used to it, but he's done it before. He's dealt with it before. And I think with these type of guys, with Hayden and with Hurst and Pitts, what's good about them, they're very athletic. They're able to be flexed out wide considerably. And I think they're probably going to have to resort to that a little bit this year as well, because of that aspect of not having that guy like Julio Jones around. So I think you're going to see plenty of 2 tight end sets, but I also think you're going to see a lot of times where coming out of the huddle, Pitts is at X receiver, maybe Hurst may be at X receiver, Hurst may be in the slot. You're going to see a mixture of that. And I think they're going to have to kind of lean on that going forward for the passing aspect.
And speaking of Pitts, I think he'll be more of a wide receiver 2 with the way he's lined up, as opposed to a traditional tight end with, in regard to just lineup construct. I think we'll use Pitts a lot of the way the Saints used Jimmy Graham back in his heyday in the early 2010s. So I think we're going to roll into this with Calvin Ridley as a wide receiver 1 and Kyle Pitts really in that more de facto wide receiver 2 role and more of a tight end by name.
Let me ask you guys this. Let me ask you guys this real quick. So remember when the Panthers drafted Devin Funchess, and Funchess was listed as a tight end, but he really leaned himself out to the point where the Panthers kind of forced him to play receiver, and it took him a few years to really get that up under his belt. All right. Do you guys foresee the same thing with Pitts, where it's like, okay, he's listed as a tight end, 6'6", 245, but I wouldn't be surprised if the guy leans out a little bit more, and next thing you know, he's 6'6", 225, 230, and now he's playing primarily receiver. Do you guys foresee that?
I mean, I don't think they want that. I think they want to have him as a tight end.
I don't think you will want that either.
Yeah,
I think they will play him more as a wide receiver, but I don't think that kind of body change will happen just because of how fast he is right now. Like Devin Funchess, it was fine coming out of college, but he wasn't Kyle Pitts. Like Kyle Pitts is on another level than where Devin Funchess was, and I think he's more prepared and more suited to play wide receiver right away than Funchess was coming into Carolina.
Right. But Funchess, they forced Funchess to be a receiver, and I don't know if he was ready for that transition. I don't think he was able enough for that type of transition, and you saw what the end result was. I'm just wondering if it, because to me, I think with Pitts, the only way you're going to get the best out of him is just like not even have he doesn't need to have wide receiver responsibilities or tight end responsibilities. Just get his ass on the field. Like that's how I'm looking at it. Let's not
exactly.
bog him down like that.
Right, like he doesn't necessarily need to have, like he doesn't need to strictly play one or the other. And like, you know, Pitts is like much more of like a transcendent, I guess, athlete than like Funchess was. Like Funchess had decent size. He was 6'4", 232, which obviously is really big for a receiver, but he ran a 4.7. So like, this is a guy that probably should have been a tight end. And they did, you know, and kind of bumped around a little bit, but he was not an athlete. Like he was not anywhere near Pitts as an athlete. So like I feel like they're gonna try to keep Pitts.
And they made him. Yeah. And they made him play receiver, even though it was clearly, you know, the signs were clearly there. Like this guy does not belong out on the boundary. But okay,
right.
Whatever.
He also didn't block, so that was a problem too when you're that big and you can't block. So that's a big problem. But yeah, I mean, I guess we'll have to see how Pitts performs this year. And it's going to be a lot of responsibility for him. But, you know, I think that he's going to perform well. I don't know that, like, he'll ever live up to the expectations that people have put on him just because he's so hyped. But he'll probably have, like, I think some people that were saying he'd have, like, around 800 yards. I think that's pretty reasonable. You know, he'll probably have a good number of touchdowns as well. But, you know, Pitts is probably going to be the de facto number 2 receiver, but I think he's still going to play a lot of tight end. Like, I think he'll be in line some, he'll be flexed out some, you know, he'll be used in the slot some. They're probably just going to move him and Hayden Hurst around a lot. But the big thing is that this is going to be probably a base 12 offense if they can keep their tight ends healthy. Because this is not a player that's got a lot of hype, but Lee Smith is someone they brought in as well. They actually traded for him. He's a great blocker, so I think they're going to be using multiple tight end sets as their base offense, or, you know, which means that it could be as much as 3 wide receiver sets, and that helps for a lot of things. You know, we've talked about it before, that the 12 personnel, you know, forces the defense to choose between playing nickel against more of a run-focused package or playing base against 2 tight ends that are probably more athletic than the majority of linebackers you put on them. So they're probably hoping that having that schematic and matchup advantage can help them overcome the loss of a true difference maker wide receiver like Julio Jones, and that they can kind of scheme their way out of a kind of top-heavy wide receiver group. I mean, like, they have Calvin Ridley, who is obviously a wide receiver 1, but Russell Gage probably best as a wide receiver 3. And they have just kind of a bunch of wide receiver 3-esque guys, which is great for depth, but they don't necessarily have a second guy that's like a true threat at wide receiver after Calvin Ridley. So they're going to be depending on Pitts to be basically that guy, to be that high-end receiving threat. Because if anything happens to Ridley, then it has to be Pitts as the like game changer, because there's not really anyone else that's going to fill that role. So it's scary.
That scares me, man.
It's very scary.
That scares me. Not saying he's not capable of doing it. It's just the fact that you're telling a young rookie tight end who's the highest drafted tight end ever, you're telling him we need you to mostly fill up Julio's shoes in year one.
Yeah, basically. No pressure.
Yeah. No pressure at all. Yeah, we just need you. You don't have to be Julio year one, but if you can be Quinn Torres, that would be great. You know, if you can just fill most of his shoes, not all of them. And again, that's a lot to ask for a rookie tight end. Because I'm a little nervous. I'll be honest with you. They have the components to be a really good offense. And I'm not talking like Kansas City, Tampa Bay-esque top 5. I thought they could have been that with Julio, absolutely. But I think they have enough right now to be a really good offense. But even if Pitts is who he is or who he can be, or even if he has a great rookie year, I can't see this offensive unit as a whole being an elite group.
Yeah, it's harder to see that like ceiling without Julio here. They just don't have that truly elite, like dominant possibility very much as like in the cards without Julio. It kind of reminds me of like Kansas City's offense in a way, which is obviously Kansas City has Mahomes, which is their like elite talent, but it's that team, it has a really good receiver and Tyreek Hill and a great tight end and Travis Kelce, but like the rest of the offensive weapons aren't like, none of them are really like high-end elite guys. There's a lot of contributors, but
it's more of whoever shows up on a particular Sunday. One Sunday it may be Sammy Watkins that gives them 6 catches, and another Sunday it may be DeMarcus Robinson who gives them 6 catches, and that's just one day it may be Edwards-Helaire who gives them some receiving punch to make up the difference. But while it works in Kansas City, because
they have Andy Reid and Mahomes, so yeah.
Right, they have Andy Reid and they have Mahomes.
And the offensive line, notwithstanding, last year due to lots of opt-outs and injuries, being pretty damn good. So,
not to mention you have a talent in Tyreek Hill who defenses are afraid of. Let's just be quite honest with you, okay? They're going to play. They play Tyreek 10 yards off the ball every snap anyway. So that already gives them an advantage right there.
Yeah,
we'll see what happens with Ridley in that role, but it's a lot has to go right this upcoming season on offense.
And it's going to really show us like how much of a bonus Arthur Smith is. Like if he's as good as his stats show in Tennessee, where he took that offense from being kind of perennially mediocre to the best red zone offense in the league by like a mile, and a lot of other good stats along the way, like that, if he can do that here, and like Tennessee's offense had some weapons, but they weren't like absolutely stacked. They had AJ Brown, they had Corey Davis, and they had Jonnu Smith, but like outside of those, like the Atlanta, you could say like, oh well, Atlanta has Calvin Ridley and Russell Gage and Kyle Pitts and Hayden Hurst, so like they have comparable weapons, but it just depends. Like, is the scheme as good as we think it is, and can the offensive line do that?
You also had a silverback gorilla in the backfield.
So well, yeah, Derrick Henry. That's an important thing. But yeah, so we'll see if he needs a Derrick Henry to make that work or not. But yeah. So we'll see. And I know someone in the chat mentioned Zaccheaus, and like I think Zaccheaus has a role, certainly more of a role now than he did before. But I don't know how big of a role it will be. Maybe they view Zaccheaus as a true contributor. Maybe they view him as a wide receiver 3 type of player, and they just, now we're going to get him on the field more that Julio's gone. So, I think Zaccheaus was always way too talented to be an undrafted free agent. It was always puzzling that he didn't get drafted. So, we'll see. We'll see what happens there. We do have one last donation for $5 from George Costanza, show benefactor. Thank you, George. We appreciate you. He says, all right, guys, when we make that deep playoff run and the Super Bowl, I'm going to tweet at Julio and ask him how the beach is, since he wanted to go to brighter and brighter shores elsewhere. Rise up. I think Pitts could be our new Julio Jones in time. I assume he means, yeah. So, I think we're all hoping that, but that's just, yeah.
Stop doing that.
Yeah, don't put that on him, but, Hopefully he's a very, very good tight end.
It will be interesting, though, to see how that offense is without Arthur Smith, because you can look at just stats alone and see how much everybody improved when Arthur Smith took over as offensive coordinator. Ryan Tannehill had by far his best season. So to think that Matt Ryan to the new Ryan Tannehill is like going to be, like an upgrade. I mean, I don't see Ryan Tannehill having a better season than he did last year.
Right.
All of a sudden, Tannehill is an elite quarterback for some reason. Like, where the hell did this come from?
Well, fantasy football plays into that. When you have 7 rushing touchdowns, as Ryan Tannehill did,
I mean,
your numbers, but
yeah.
I mean, he put up respectable numbers, but damn, like, come on, guys, let's be to say that he was an elite passer. You got to look at the numbers, man. Like, they were 26 in the league in deep passing last year. Like, they don't throw the ball deep last year for a reason.
It's a very intermediate scheme. Yeah.
Yeah, so of course his deep passing numbers are going to look stellar. He threw the ball deep twice a game. Like, who the hell? I mean, come on now.
They hit every time they threw it, but they didn't exactly. I mean, they didn't bomb it, but like that's kind of another thing about Arthur Smith. Like, he doesn't throw a lot of deep bombs, but they seem to work when he does throw them, so that helps.
Right.
So yeah, we'll see. This will be the test. We'll see if it was Arthur Smith or not.
He takes people to that next level, like Derrick Henry, who, right now is like a football god. It wasn't like perfect right when he was drafted. The first 2 seasons, I think he was battling with DeMarco Murray and then Deion Lewis for snaps. Like, he wasn't just perfect from the get-go. And then Arthur Smith comes in. Right. And Arthur Smith comes in, and he knew exactly how to use him. Now he's, one of the best players in the NFL.
I mean, I also hate to say this, but the Falcons with Julio Jones last year still only won 4 games. So it's not like we just gutted a Super Bowl roster right now. We haven't made the playoffs in like 4 years. So I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what the new regime can do, giving them a fair chance with this team after we saw what Dirk Cutter did with this team and the previous coaching staff did for the past 3 years. And I also find it ironic that, Julio was mad that the Falcons were losing. And one of the main reasons why he demanded a trade was because they fired Dan Quinn last year. Like, that's just not out to me.
That is bizarre.
That's the ironic thing. He's going – oh, sorry.
No,
he's going to the team – he's going to the Titans, who were made good largely because of the offensive scheme that was by now the Falcons head coach.
Yeah.
I don't understand.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of wanted to save that for Wednesday for the most part, just because, like,
okay.
Just because, like, I'm hoping we'll get like more intel, like some of Julio's side maybe, because we have gotten some intel, about Julio's motives and how everything played out, but we haven't heard much about like from Julio's perspective. So maybe by Wednesday we'll have a little bit more.
I can understand his reasoning as far as why he wanted to move. Okay, fine, but to come out and say, all right, one of my ideal destinations is Tennessee. Wait a minute, what? Like, I don't. Hold on. To me, again, I'm going to look at this. It's a lateral move. I'm just being honest. It's a lateral move.
Mm-hmm.
Tennessee right now with Julio is, to me, is not that much better than Atlanta with Julio. They are in certain aspects, but to me, I don't even think, even with Julio in the fold right now, I still don't think Tennessee is the division favorite in the AFC South. I think Indy's the king right there.
I guess we'll see. Yeah. I mean, it really depends on Arthur Smith, right? Like, if Arthur Smith was really what made that offense special, they kind of need Julio just to tread water, because we're gonna see. This is.
So
I mean, if he was upset about how the defense played over the past few years in Atlanta, you're not going to a stellar defense right now in Tennessee. Let's just be honest there. And the reason why they took a step back is because the defensive coordinator in Atlanta left Tennessee, and they fell apart after that. So I don't understand why Tennessee. I don't get it. But whatever.
Yeah.
We'll say that.
So basically, putting it into terms for us simple folk who aren't millionaires, it'd be like working at Wells Fargo and then being like, I'm out of here. I hate doing this kind of stuff. I want to go elsewhere. And then you go to like Bank of America. It's like, okay.
Yeah. I want to
just kind of switched.
I'm done with the banking field, and then all of a sudden you're
right
at Regions Bank now. Like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
I thought you were. All right, whatever.
Yeah. So, we'll see. Like, there's a lot of like Titans people in the chat that are really taking this the wrong way. Like, I have no problem.
If they had
with
Arthur Smith,
yeah,
I think if they still had Arthur Smith, the Titans
why
would be
in the
something
hell
nasty.
are Titans fans in our chat? Like, what are y'all doing?
Well,
why?
It's it's like when we say that Arthur Smith is good, it's like implied that the Titans are not good anymore, and it's like, look, like you lost arguably one of the best offensive coordinators in the league, and you guys have sour grapes about it. You need to kind of get over it, man. Like believing that you're not going to regress at all is not like that's not realistic.
Because let's be quite honest, a good portion of that Tennessee fan base was kind of hurt that he fucking left. So what is it? So now it's all
we went through the same thing with Kyle Shanahan.
Yes, we tried to pretend that it wasn't a big deal, and that was definitely not
true. Deal, and it was like Tennessee fans were discouraged that he left and got a head coaching job. They didn't want to see him leave. Now all of a sudden he's just a guy calling plays. All right, whatever. We'll see about that. But
it's like
the Titans have talent. There's no question about that.
Yes, they're still going to be a good offense. It's just like, are they going to be number one red zone offense? Because if you give the Titans the Falcons' red zone efficiency last year, they're probably not a playoff contender. So, and that's more of an indictment of Dirk Cutter than anything. But we'll see.
Because there's still question marks hanging over Ryan Tannehill. The fact that he's been in the league this long, he's played in that system in Tennessee for this long, and teams and opposing defenses are still looking at him as the weakest link on offense. That's saying something. Now they're looking at him in that aspect, and they're also looking at him and saying, you don't have your play caller that's been calling plays for you the past 2 years. What are you going to do now? So again,
you don't just luck into 75% red zone efficiency 2 years in a row. You don't luck
2 years
into
in a row.
That is incredible.
Because it was 3 years ago. Tannehill was atrocious under Adam Gase. We saw how bad he is with the below average play caller, and we saw when he got with a play caller that called plays to his strength. We saw what he was capable of. Okay, well, that equation is gone now. Arthur Smith is gone. So now what, Ryan Tannehill? That's the question. That's the question. Now what? Can you win like this without your play caller?
And it's like, yes, Derrick Henry contributed, just like lots of players contribute, but you didn't have that red zone efficiency the first several years you had Derrick Henry. You were still using who was that other running back the Titans signed that was not good?
Dion Lewis.
Dion Lewis. Yeah,
Lewis.
Your previous offensive coordinator was splitting carries with Dion Lewis and Derrick Henry before that. So like, don't pretend that it was always just Derrick Henry doing everything. Derrick Henry didn't score the majority of the Titans' red zone touchdowns either. I'm pretty sure. So
I love how Todd Downing all of a sudden is a guru.
Yeah. There's nothing wrong with the Titans' offense. Like, we'll see how Todd Downing does, but pretending that losing Arthur Smith is not going to make a difference is ridiculous. And you're going to
pretending that Ryan Tannehill is all of a sudden elite is also ridiculous. Like, come on, man.
We're going to see. I mean, I think Tannehill certainly had a career resurgence in Tennessee, and like, obviously he had something to do with that.
He did,
so,
but I'm not going to say he's elite because I watched the games. He posted great numbers because Arthur Smith called plays a certain way to keep him safe. He was efficient.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we'll see. I mean, I don't think anyone's saying that Titans are going to like suck all of a sudden or something. It's just like when you lose a really quality offensive coordinator, it hurts your offense. So maybe with the addition of Julio, like it's kind of a net wash, but it's just weird that I feel like, I mean, Falcons fans did the exact same thing when Kyle Shanahan left. So, like, I understand, but I'm telling you, you guys are doing the exact same thing we were doing, and you're probably going to have a bit of a rude awakening that, like, losing your offensive coordinator who was doing amazing things for you, it's not going to help your offense. It's not going to help your offense. So, that's all. Like, no one here has a problem with the Titans. Honestly, like, of all the teams that were mentioned, the Titans were one of the ones I was hoping Julio would end up with, because I think the Titans are like one of the least onerous teams in the NFL. I think generally Titans fans are very polite and nice. I've known a lot of them. I have a lot of family in Tennessee. So like, I've always had a soft spot for the team. So, like, if you guys think we were, like, trying to shit on the Titans, it's, I don't know where that's coming from, but you guys should probably calm down.
They're one of those teams that, like, don't bother me, and I hope they do well. Like,
yeah. So, Ethan. Just saying, everybody calm down. So, yeah, we lost, obviously, Gina Kelly and Dave Choate. They had to go back to work, but we thank them for coming on. For everyone else, just give you guys a chance to get any final takes off. We'll start with Evan Birchfield, at Evan Birchfield on Twitter. Evan, anything that you would like to add? Anything you'd like to plug?
Not really. Well, I do have my 32 sleepers on 32 teams fantasy article coming out eventually. And just go to Falcoholic.com because we got a lot of Julio stuff planned, reminiscing about. And like and subscribe and follow the Instagram page. So I guess I do have stuff to plug.
Yeah, cool. Definitely check that out stuff. Yeah, check that out for sure, guys. And also with us, we have Eric Robinson. He is at _Eric_Robinson. Eric, anything that you'd like to add? Anything that you're working on?
This morning, I had a retrospective column on Julio Jones' career in Atlanta that was published out there on the Falcoholic.com. So give that a read. Just pretty much just kind of, flashback a little bit to, his time in Atlanta, his 10 seasons there, what he meant to the team, what he meant to the city, and what he meant to just the fans in general. So give that a look and definitely head over to the Falcoholic.com as well.
Yes, check that out, guys, for sure. Also with us, we have Adnan Nikic at Say Which Way. Adnan, anything else you'd like to add? Anything you'd like to plug?
I'm working in the middle of the Falcoholic Falcons Greatest Moments bracket. We're in round 2 right now. So, Evan's been doing a great job helping me with the graphics for that. Those are getting churned out, and they will be in the coming weeks. So, check those out and vote for your favorite Falcons plays.
Yep, definitely check that out. I know Anand put a lot of work into that. It's a very fun series, so check that out for sure, guys. I am Kevin Knight at Falcoholic Kevin on Twitter. We're going to be having our normal Wednesday show as well, so check that out on Wednesday night at 8:10 p.m. Eastern. We're also going to be having our next Patreon Q&A session, so if you're interested in getting involved with that, just make sure you're signed up on our Patreon page, which is patreon.com/Falcoholic That's going to be Friday at, I think it's 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock, something like that. But it's on the Patreon, and you have until Friday to get involved with that if you'd like to take part. Obviously, I think there's going to be a lot of Julio-related questions. We're going to try to have some special guests on there as well. But yeah, guys, if you don't mind throwing a like and a subscription at the channel, if you enjoyed the show, we do appreciate that. Thanks to everyone for donating. We do appreciate your support there, and for everyone just tuning in and weathering the Julio Jones storm with us. Even thanks to, Titan fans for watching. We appreciate you guys too. This is not, you guys are making this like confrontational, and we're not trying to make this confrontational. Thank you for watching, and obviously you're entitled to your opinion. I hope that Julio does succeed there in the AFC. I hope you guys, you're like, we have beef with like so many AFC teams like the Patriots. So if you guys could just like crap on all of them and just, we could meet in the Super Bowl, that would be fantastic. But, if you want to make it like, this mean thing, between us, I guess that's okay. But, let's all just, relax a little bit. It's the off season. So until then, guys, for all of us here at the Falcoholic Live, we appreciate you. We will be getting into more of Julio Jones' legacy and, some of the details of the trade on Wednesday. Until then, have a great week, guys. We will talk to you next time on the Falcoholic Live. See you guys.